Disclaimer: this content is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised. I never thought one ordinary evening would change the way I looked at him forever. The rain was falling softly against the window, the house quiet, almost too quiet. I had just come back from a long day, wanting to relax, clear my head, and maybe check if he'd eaten dinner. I didn't even knock, I just opened the door, expecting to find him watching TV or asleep. But what I saw instead made my heart stop for a moment. He didn't notice me right away. The room was dimly lit, the sound of the rain mixing with his uneven breathing. I froze, unsure if I should turn back or say something. It wasn't what I expected to walk into, not like that, not when I was wearing what I was wearing. The red lingerie had been an impulse, something that made me feel confident, a bit playful after weeks of stress. But in that moment, standing there, it felt like everything had suddenly shifted. I didn't speak. I couldn't. My thoughts raced. Should I pretend I saw nothing? Should I make a sound? My pulse was pounding so loudly it drowned out every other noise. And for a second, our eyes met. There was no anger, no shame, just a strange mix of surprise and something neither of us could quite understand. I stepped back quickly, the air between us charged with something unspoken. The kind of moment you can't explain, only feel. The rest of the night went by in silence. He stayed in his room, I stayed in mine, unable to stop thinking about that single glance. What did it mean? Why did it feel so heavy, so complicated? I told myself it was just an accident, that I shouldn't read too much into it. But the way he looked at me, there was something there. Something that unsettled me. The next morning, when we crossed paths in the kitchen, the air was thick with unspoken words. He tried to act normal, like nothing had happened. But I could feel the awkwardness in every small gesture, the way he avoided eye contact, the way he fidgeted with his cup. I wanted to say something, to break the tension, but I didn't know where to start. Was it better to pretend nothing happened? Or was pretending only making it worse? I could see the questions in his eyes too. Maybe he was wondering if I was angry or embarrassed. Maybe he was just as confused as I was. And somewhere deep down, I wondered if this moment had changed how we saw each other forever. Have you ever been in a situation where silence said more than words ever could? What would you do if you found yourself caught between what's right and what you feel? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. I want to know what you think should happen next. Should I confront him about that night, or let it go and pretend it never happened? The next few days passed in a strange, heavy silence. It wasn't the usual kind of quiet that happens when two people are just busy. It was the kind that lingers, that follows you around the house like a shadow. Every time I saw him, I could feel that memory hanging in the air between us. I tried to act normal, doing my chores, pretending everything was fine. But deep inside, I knew something had changed. He started helping around the house more, offering to cook dinner, clean up, or run errands without being asked. It was his way of saying something without using words. I noticed how careful he had become, his tone softer, his movements more thoughtful whenever I was around. And though neither of us brought up that night, it was clear we were both thinking about it. Sometimes I'd catch him looking at me, quickly turning away when our eyes met. It wasn't an inappropriate stare, it was something deeper, something filled with confusion and curiosity. Maybe he was trying to figure out what I was thinking, or maybe he was just trying to understand his own feelings. I couldn't tell. And honestly, I was just as confused. One evening, while I was folding laundry, he walked in and offered to help. It was such a small gesture, but it felt different. Our hands brushed for a second, and we both froze, pretending it didn't happen. My heart skipped, but I kept my eyes on the clothes, trying not to let my thoughts run wild. I could feel his gaze though, gentle, unsure, waiting for some kind of signal from me. But I didn't give one. At night, I would lie awake replaying everything in my head. Was it wrong to feel this tension, even when nothing had actually happened? Or was it just human nature to get caught up in moments that we don't fully understand? I kept telling myself that I was just imagining it, that it was only the awkwardness after an accident. But every time we were in the same room, that quiet pull between us returned. He had always been respectful, never crossing any line, but the closeness that had grown between us was undeniable. It was a quiet connection, the kind that doesn't need words but makes you feel something every time you're near the other person. I didn't know where it was going, or if it even should go anywhere, but it was there, real and impossible to ignore. The day it all shifted again started like any other. I was in the kitchen, making coffee, when he walked in with a small smile, as if testing whether I was still keeping my distance. "Good morning," he said softly, and for the first time in days, I smiled back. It was simple, almost ordinary, but it felt like a moment that could change everything. The next morning felt different. He was quiet again, almost thoughtful. There was a certain distance in his voice when he greeted me, like he was carrying something heavy he couldn't say out loud. I noticed it right away, but I didn't ask. Sometimes silence says more than questions ever could. Still, I couldn't ignore how his eyes lingered just a little too long, as if he wanted to speak but was holding himself back. Later that day, I overheard him talking on the phone. His tone was low, careful, but there was something emotional in it, something that made me pause. I didn't mean to listen, but I caught fragments. "I don't know what to do," he said softly. "It's complicated." The words stayed with me long after the call ended. Complicated. That was exactly what everything had become between us. I tried to keep busy, watering the plants, cleaning the living room, pretending I wasn't thinking about him. But no matter what I did, the thoughts found their way back. It wasn't just about that one night anymore. It was about the growing connection that neither of us knew how to handle. Every small gesture, him handing me a cup of coffee, or waiting for me before dinner, seemed loaded with unspoken meaning. One evening, I invited a close friend over for coffee. I needed to talk, even if I couldn't share every detail. She noticed how distracted I was and asked what was wrong. I told her vaguely that there was tension at home, that something had changed but I didn't know how to fix it. She gave me a look, the kind that says she knew there was more to the story than I was saying. "Just be careful," she said gently. "Sometimes emotions can blur lines we never meant to cross." Her words echoed in my head all night. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was reading too much into every small thing. But then the next morning, I found a small note on the counter. It said, "Thanks for everything. I'm sorry if I made things weird." My chest tightened reading it. Was he planning to leave? Or was it his way of trying to end whatever this was before it got more complicated? That night, he didn't come home until late. I stayed awake, pretending to watch TV but really just waiting. When I finally heard the door open, he hesitated in the doorway before quietly saying, "Can we talk tomorrow?" His voice was tired, almost nervous. That simple question kept me up until morning. What did he want to talk about? Was he finally going to tell me what had been bothering him, or was this the moment everything would change between us? The next morning arrived with a heavy stillness that made the air feel different, almost charged. I barely slept, replaying his words in my mind, "Can we talk tomorrow?" I didn't know if I was supposed to feel nervous or relieved. The coffee tasted bitter, the clock seemed slower than usual, and every small sound in the house made me flinch. When he finally walked into the kitchen, the look on his face said everything and nothing at once. His eyes were calm, but his hands fidgeted as if he was gathering the courage to speak. "About last week," he began, his voice low. My heart started to race. I didn't interrupt, even though a dozen thoughts ran through my head. He hesitated, searching for the right words. I didn't mean to make things uncomfortable between us. I don't know how to explain it. I nodded slowly, trying to keep my tone even. It's okay, I said quietly. But it wasn't okay, not really. The silence that followed was thick, full of all the things we didn't dare to say out loud. Then he looked at me, really looked, and in that single moment, I felt the weight of everything unsaid hanging between us. The day passed strangely after that. We went about our routines, pretending everything was normal, but it wasn't. The tension had grown into something neither of us could escape. Later that evening, a storm rolled in. The sound of thunder echoed through the walls as the power flickered, throwing the room into darkness for a few seconds before the lights steadied again. He was standing by the window, watching the rain, his reflection faint against the glass. I found myself standing beside him, drawn by something I couldn't explain. The silence was louder than the thunder outside. You ever feel like something's pulling you towards something you shouldn't want? He said suddenly, not looking at me. The question caught me off guard. I could feel my pulse quicken, but I didn't answer. Maybe he wasn't expecting one. Maybe he just needed to say it out loud. We stood there, both lost in the storm and our thoughts. The lightning flashed, and for a second, I saw the uncertainty in his eyes, the same confusion that had been in mine for weeks. There was honesty there, raw and unfiltered. But there was also fear. Before I could say anything, the power went out completely, plunging the room into darkness. The sound of the rain grew louder, the only thing filling the space between us. I heard him take a quiet breath, close enough to feel the warmth of it in the dark. And then, nothing. Just silence, and the pounding of my heart. The darkness seemed endless that night. The rain outside hit the windows harder, and the only light came from the faint glow of the street lamp bleeding through the curtains. I stood still, not knowing what to do, my breath shallow. I could sense him nearby, both of us unsure how to move forward from that moment. Then, somewhere in the dark, I heard him whisper, "I didn't mean for any of this to happen." His voice trembled slightly, filled with something that sounded like guilt, or maybe fear. Before I could respond, the power came back, flooding the room with soft light. We both blinked, startled. He took a step back, running a hand through his hair, avoiding my eyes. "I think I need to tell you something," he said quietly. My stomach tightened. The tone in his voice wasn't about what had happened between us, it was heavier, something deeper. He hesitated for a long time before finally speaking. "I got a call last night, from my father." The name alone made me freeze. His father, someone I hadn't seen or spoken to in years, someone who had walked out and left behind a trail of pain neither of us fully healed from. "He said he's coming back," he continued, his eyes flickering toward me for a reaction. The air left my lungs for a second. I didn't know how to respond. The past I thought I had buried suddenly rose up again, threatening to pull me back into memories I didn't want to relive. "Why now?" I asked softly. He shook his head. "I don't know. But he said he wants to make things right, with both of us." That single sentence changed everything. The tension that had been building between us now collided with something even more complicated: history, resentment, and the fear of reopening old wounds. The house, once quiet, now felt too small for everything unsaid. Over the next few days, the anticipation of that reunion filled every corner of the home. He grew restless, pacing around, avoiding my eyes whenever the topic came up. I caught myself wondering if his father's return would fix things, or destroy what little balance we still had left. Every time I looked at him, I saw the same storm I was feeling inside. Then came the night he arrived. The knock on the door was slow, deliberate, and it sent a chill through me. I opened it, and there he was, the man who had left years ago, looking older, but with the same eyes that once held promises he never kept. He smiled faintly, almost as if nothing had changed. "You both look good," he said quietly, stepping inside. The tension between father and son was immediate. They exchanged polite words, but underneath it all was a current of bitterness, regret, and something unspoken. I watched as the two of them sat across from each other, the silence between them louder than the thunder outside. And then, out of nowhere, the father looked at me and said, "I didn't just come back for forgiveness, there's something I need to tell you both." The room went still again. My heart pounded, my hands cold. He looked at his son, then back at me, his expression unreadable. "You both deserve to know the truth," he said slowly. That single line changed the air in the room, like a quiet storm about to break. What truth could he mean? Something from the past? Something that would change everything between us? For a long moment, no one spoke. The ticking of the wall clock was the only sound in the room. His father sat still, his hands clasped, eyes shifting between the two of us. My heart was pounding, waiting for him to speak. He took a deep breath and said quietly, "The truth is, I never left because I wanted to. I was forced to." Both of us looked at him, stunned. His voice trembled slightly as he continued. "Years ago, I got involved in something I shouldn't have, business that went bad. I thought walking away would keep you both safe. But it cost me everything." He turned toward his son, regret in his eyes. "I thought if I stayed away, you'd have a chance to live normally. I never imagined I'd lose you both this way." The words hit hard. I wanted to believe him, but the years of silence, the unanswered questions, they weren't easy to forget. My stepson looked conflicted, his jaw tight. "You could have trusted us," he said quietly. "Instead, you left us to deal with everything." His father nodded slowly, accepting the weight of it. "You're right," he said. "And now I'm here to make things right, even if it's too late." For a while, no one moved. The air between them was heavy with emotion, pain, anger, and something close to forgiveness trying to find its place. Then, as if gathering all his strength, the father looked directly at me and said, "There's more you should know." His voice softened. "The people I worked with back then, they might still be looking for me. And now that I'm here, they might come looking for you too." The words sent a chill down my spine. Everything that had been happening suddenly made sense, the strange calls, the uneasy feeling lately, the tension in his son's eyes. It wasn't just emotion that had changed between us, danger had been quietly circling without us realizing it. Before I could speak, there was a sharp knock on the door, 3 quick raps that made us all jump. His father's face went pale. "It's them," he whispered. "They found me." The knock came again, louder this time. My stepson stood up quickly, moving protectively in front of me. "What do we do?" he asked, his voice low but steady. His father looked at both of us with a strange mix of fear and resolve. "No matter what happens," he said, "you stay behind me." The doorknob turned slowly. My breath caught as the door creaked open. But instead of what we expected, it wasn't danger standing there, it was a police officer, drenched from the rain. "I think you'll want to hear this," the officer said. "The people you're afraid of, they've already been caught. Someone turned them in." The father looked stunned. "Who?" he asked. The officer paused, glancing toward the son. "He did," he said simply. For a moment, everything froze. The words from the officer hung in the air like a final echo, he had turned them in. His father looked at him with disbelief that slowly softened into something deeper, pride, maybe even forgiveness. "You knew?" his father asked quietly. He nodded, his voice calm but filled with emotion. "I found out a week ago. I didn't tell you because I wanted to make sure you were safe first." The tension that had been building for so long finally began to fade. The storm outside had stopped, and a faint calm settled over the house. His father sat down heavily, exhaling like he had been holding his breath for years. "I don't deserve this," he said softly. "But thank you." It was the first time I had ever seen him look so human, stripped of pride and regret all at once. Over the next few days, everything slowly began to return to normal, or as close to normal as life could get after all that. The police confirmed that the danger was over. The house felt lighter, the air clearer. His father decided to leave the city for a while, promising to start fresh and keep in touch this time. Before he left, he turned to me and said, "Take care of each other. You've both been through enough." When the door closed behind him, there was a strange stillness, but not the kind filled with tension anymore. It was peace, quiet and real. We both stood there for a while, unsure what to say. Finally, I smiled faintly and said, "You didn't just save him, you saved us." He didn't reply, just gave a small nod, and for the first time in a long while, everything felt right. That night, as the rain faded into a calm drizzle, I sat by the window, thinking about everything that had happened. The secrets, the silence, the tension, it had all led to a truth that was both painful and freeing. Sometimes, it takes chaos to remind us what really matters: forgiveness, understanding, and the courage to protect those we love.